I was invited to another PTSD group upon the retirement of that therapist, and everyone went around the room, and everybody's story was more worse than this guy's mother was an alcoholic, and this guy's father was that, and they went all the way around the room, and I'm going, oh my God, I can't. And they came to me, and I said, guys, I almost embarrassed. I had a Leave It to Beaver family. My dad was my scoutmaster. My mother was my den leader. My parents were involved with my brother and myself growing up. We were a religious family. We're Jewish, and we all went to temple together. And my brother and I both got bar mitzvahed and everything. So I think maybe that foundation plays a part.
Sure.
Normally, you go to ROTC summer camp in between your junior and senior year. Because of co-op, we went after our senior year. So I was already graduated. At the end of these 8 or 9 weeks, I'd be commissioned as second lieutenant, regardless of what happened, you know. And I walked into the sergeant, and I signed in, and he said, "What position would you like in the unit?" I said, "I want to be a platoon sergeant." He said, "A platoon sergeant? Don't you want to be an officer?" I said, "No." I said, "You need to give the officer positions to the cadets who have not proven themselves yet, because they're going to go back to their colleges, and you need to determine which ones are the best." I've already finished that, and I've been a cadet general officer, you know, for God's sakes. You know, I want you to be platoon sergeant. He said, "Why platoon sergeant?" I said, "Because they set up the barracks, and I want a lower bunk nowhere near the latrine." He said, "You're officer material." So, and I was probably one of the youngest guys, and in fact, before I signed in, I was in the BOQ, and I went into the bathroom, and there was a brigadier general in there. And you know, you share a bathroom between 2 rooms. And I said, "Excuse me, sir," and he said, "No, it's okay, come on in." And I said, "How long have you been in the Army, sir?" He said, "I think like 32 years or something like that." And he said, "How long have you?" I said, "Well, sir, I need to look at my watch." Because I'd only been in the Army like 24 hours. Yeah. When we first arrived at Fort Lewis, Washington, we were allowed to go off post, and I decided I was going to go down and get a cheeseburger and a milkshake and some French fries, because we didn't have a lot of that in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And it's nighttime, and I'm out there, and I don't have my weapon with me, and I know that I'm in the United States, but I just felt uncomfortable without my M16. It was the first time I had walked around anywhere in a year where I didn't have a weapon with me. Now I eventually got over that, but it was a little disconcerting. I wouldn't call it PTSD. I was used to something, and I knew that I always, oops, that's not a good cast, that I needed that for protection, and it always had to be with me, and now I didn't have it. And I'm obviously not an accomplished fisherman. There was a new round that came out called the firecracker round. It was base ejecting, and it would go up and it would drop bomblets. And when we got them, they just weren't hitting the target right, because it's got to go past the target and drop the bomblets, and you got the inertia and everything. So I found a couple of guys that actually had PhDs that had been drafted on a recoilless rifle. They were not happy, and the sergeant in charge didn't like these 2 guys from Berkeley, around. And so we kind of made a trade, and I gave him some guys that, from the neck down, were more effective for him, and I wanted some guys with neck up. So we were trying to figure out, how can we adjust this? Because with the computer, the only thing you could do is mess with the meteorological data. And our S3, Major Overby, said, "I don't want you screwing with that." Well, I said, "Yes, sir," and totally ignored him. And we made some adjustments, and we were the only ones that were actually hitting the target. So Fort Sill sent some people over to find out what we had done. And we told them we were messing with the Met data, which they have the ability to change the program. We didn't. We just putzed around with one of the input devices. And they come over, and I could see Major Overby coming down with smoke coming out of his ears. And, uh, and I said, before we start, I want to tell you that without Major Overby's help and assistance, none of this would have been possible. So Major Overby didn't say a word. They gave all of us Bronze Stars for and Major Overby, I think, got the Legion of Merit, and he couldn't spell gunnery. But I knew we were doing something right, and they eventually came out and changed the programming of the FADACs so that the new firecracker round would hit the target like it's supposed to. When I was in Afghanistan, I had an opportunity to hire a number of them to work for me on my contract. They're incredible individuals. And so, yes, I was extremely proud to be a Green Beret and remained in the Special Forces for a number of years. But back then, it was not a branch. It was a detail. Aviation and Special Forces were details. And it didn't become a branch too many years later because it was being in Special Forces or being in aviation was detrimental to the careers of those people in those units. For example, if you were going to be promoted, and most of the officers who flew the Cobras were armor officers, just happened. Well, now they're coming up for promotion to major, and they go before the board. They hadn't been in a tank since they were a second lieutenant. Then, they've been flying helicopters. They wouldn't get promoted or wouldn't get command positions because they don't know anything about an armor unit. In Special Forces, you go before the board, and infantry guy goes in, and I command an infantry company of 340 people. And what do? I command a 12-man A-team. Well, what the hell's an A-team? So these guys weren't getting promoted in the two. So the Army decided to make aviation a branch and Special Forces a branch. So they get promoted within, they're only competing against fellow aviators or fellow Green Berets. And I remember when I was down at Fort Stewart one time with the group, my father was having heart surgery. So I told my exec, I'm leaving, I'm going down, because we're in Fort Stewart, Georgia. My dad was in Florida. I could drive down, I could be at the hospital. And because I had gotten a Red Cross message. And as I'm leaving, the post commander, a two-star general, said, "Where are you going, Colonel?" My dad's got surgery, I'm leaving. Well, who's going to be in charge of your unit? I said, my executive officer. Well, can he handle a job? I said, sir, if he couldn't handle a job, he wouldn't be my executive officer. And with all due respect, you're blocking my way to my car. And I had 100% faith in my exec, and in all the other officers and the NCOs. I had fantastic, I was blessed with having people working for me, subordinates of mine, who are incredible. You always want to surround yourself with people better than you. And I was fortunate enough to do that. These people knew their job. And when I was a contractor, I didn't know squat about logistics. Well, other than the basics. These men and women who were medics and mechanics and logisticians and signal people and food service people, they knew their stuff. They were E8s, E9s, warrant officers, incredible. I remember one of our teams went down and the Marine said, you guys are just contractors. I said, your team leader, the team leader there is a former command sergeant major. That other guy is a warrant officer W3. And it went through all the different people on the team. And I said, there's probably 135 years of experience or more on that team. Tell me about your Marines. No disrespect to the Marine Corps, but they're young guys and young guys, and I was very pleased to work with the Marine Corps. They're a totally professional organization, fantastic. Much more so than Vietnam, where the Navy was starving them to death and they didn't have equipment and training. The Marines in Afghanistan were fantastic, as were many of the other units. I was blown away by the Romanians. I was very impressed with their professionalism, and I still correspond with one of their officers. in 1960, Boy Scout Jamboree, Eisenhower was the president, they needed to select one Boy Scout to hand him a neckerchief. And if you watch the newsreels, he's wearing the neckerchief in the newsreel. I got selected. Why? My great aunt was my godmother, was the executive secretary of the Boy Scouts of America. Who she could pick, right? So I got picked, and so I got to meet President Eisenhower. And Trump came to my son's promotion, he and H.R. McMaster, and presented me with some letters thanking me for what I had done in Vietnam, delivering this baby. So I was very, I was a Trump supporter. In fact, I was one of his delegates at the National Convention. So it was very special to me to meet Trump. But getting a letter from the president, regardless of who it was, even Jimmy Carter maybe, I would have cherished. But having one from Trump and H.R. McMaster, who I've known now for many years, it was very, very special. And it's on the wall opposite. My wife framed the newspaper article from Vietnam. But one of the things that I remember most about Afghanistan, we rebuilt this high school, and the Turkish army basically put the money into it. And there was a Turkish officer, his name is this long, so I just call him Noor, I think we called him. There was no place, we had to knock down the place where the kids prayed, the mosque. It was just falling down. We had to knock the mosque down. And this school is very special. You have to be the valedictorian of your 8th or 9th grade class in order to get into this. And it's a military school, only for boys, but you live there because they come from all over the country, and they live at this school. And this is where all the future leaders of Afghanistan are going to live and come from and graduate. So I turned to the colonel and I said, we have storerooms on either end of the barracks we built. Why don't we take all the crap out of there, and I'll get some Connex containers, and we'll put all the stuff in the Connex containers, and I'll go down to the market on Friday, and I'll buy a whole bunch of prayer rugs, and we can have the kids pray in there, because it's important. These kids, the first time they've ever been away from home, we need to have a place for them to pray. So I did that. And about a month later, I got that assignment to be a program manager. So I went to see the colonel, and I told him I'm leaving, and he said, "I'm sorry to see you go." He said, "But you've proven that Christians and Muslims can work together." And I said, "Well, I'm not a Christian." He said, "Are you a Muslim?" "No, not a Muslim." He thinks for a second, he starts laughing. He says, "Wait till I tell the high command up in Ankara that the guy who built the 2 prayer rooms is a Jew."